What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. In this episode of Disguise Coverage, we're going to be diving into some questions on the Buffalo Bills defense and a bit of housekeeping for this week. Doing this episode focusing on the defense now, going to be uploading and or potentially doing a live episode for the offense, similar to this episode in style and theme later in the week, potentially on Thursday. Didn't do an episode last week. Apologies for that. Been under the weather and a lot of things going on. It's also why this tree is still up, but it's got big, red ornaments on it. So I thought it still fit for the Valentine's Day theme. Got a little mini Valentine's Day tree over there. So bit of housekeeping in case anybody's wondering why the big tree is staying up, why there was no episode last week, how things are fitting in. So stay tuned to the YouTube channel here, the Disguise Coverage playlist, Twitter, Blue Sky, all that stuff. I'll be communicating anything and everything as possible. So so keep an eye on the back end of this week for an uploaded episode similar to this, but on the offense side of the ball, or potentially a live episode of it Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll see how that schedule goes down. And RJ says, this may be the latest I can remember the big tree being up. You might be right. You might be right. I think I've made it through February before, maybe, because I think last year I had like big red garland on it and more red ornaments, or I traded out the white ones or just non-red ones for more red to make it like a big Valentine's Day tree and make that one the little Valentine's Day tree as well. But you might be right. RJ, you might be right. And K. Mori says, and I appreciate the K. Mori says, since today's on the D, seeing how the Houston Philly defensive ends were able to affect the KC tackles, is it a stylistic technique thing with the Bills defensive ends, or does it come down to just, are they not good enough? This will definitely be a focus in the episode tonight. And K. Mori says, curious because what was said on a podcast featuring former Bills offensive lines, that he says, Ant, is your voice okay? Yeah, I'm still a little sick. I get like big sick every end of the winter going into spring. Last year hit me hard in March. Whenever the Bills signed Mike Edwards, I was sick for like 5-6 days, like really hard. This time I got hit with it in February. I was down for the count like a week and a half ago, and then I was good, and then I got bad again. So I'm going to power through a little bit, maybe a little shorter of a show tonight, maybe not the normal like hour and a half to hour and 45 marathons that we do here, maybe more of a 45-minute ballpark episode tonight. But yeah, I'm doing all right, powering through. I've had some tea, drinking water, all those things. But I appreciate that. Thank you. RJ saying the tree still looks good, though. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Claude, it might be the sudden weather change, sinus stuff, allergy stuff. I feel fine physically. I just don't sound great. I think I look decent, but yeah, I'm all right. But I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you folks. But yeah, and that's a good comment there from K. Moore to kind of transition us into this episode and the thought and theme of it. For you folks joining me live as we do here, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything you folks got, put it up into the chat. If it's on a player that you think needs to be addressed, if it's on a position group, if it's on something schematic, if it's a question, if it's a player you want them to target, anything and everything regarding the defensive side of the ball for the entirety of this offseason, things draft related, draft capital, players, prospects, anything and everything, feel free to put things into the chat. I will obviously bring things up as humanly possible as we go through. Super chats obviously get priority because I respect the monetary donation, and the color distracts me from my notes and gets me around. AK Cash says, in all caps, Anthony, they need to put a One Pie Pizza where the old Allentown Pizza was. It's closed. They need to put a One Pie Pizza everywhere. And I'm not just saying that because they sponsor the show. Like, their pizza really is good. I live in the North Towns. I grew up in the South Towns, but I live in the North Towns now. And I tell, ownership and management all the time, like, you need to get like a North Towns location because it's not crazy. Like, it's like maybe like a 22-minute drive from me, from the 290 to the 90 and then to the 190 and that first exit right there based on where I'm coming from. But I think there needs to be a One Pie Pizza everywhere. Downtown, in the North Towns, anywhere and everywhere. Like each town needs to have a one pie pizza. So I second your notion there. And then saying the pizza's so good. I know it's so good. I'm actually going to get some this week. And I'm just saying I would love a one pie pizza in Rochester. Their pizza's legit great. I appreciate that. Yeah. Get some of the like more, if they push a little more into like expanding in Western New York and then getting into Central New York, they could have a little bit of an empire here. Kay Morey says, I need to try one ply. Please get one over here in Atlantic, Canada. Okay, we can try it. I'll see if they'll go international. Maybe get a Toronto location or an Ontario location somehow, some way. And then maybe get them over to go to West Coast Canada. Start a little empire here. I like it. Let's start here for, answering some questions on the Buffalo Bills, on the 2025 Buffalo Bills defense. So part of it is proposing questions. Part of it is answering them. A lot of them for me, obviously in this episode stems from kind of the questions I have just on this group as a whole and I want to continue to put this in perspective for myself, for the entirety of this offseason. And I think for a lot of folks, maybe necessarily not RJ, because I know you're always on the edge when it comes to anything and everything for the Bills. But this team, again, was a Final Four team and came very close to beating the Kansas City Chiefs and going to the Super Bowl. This is a good football team. They are just a couple pieces away in some form or fashion, schematically, personnel-wise, decision-making, all these things that kind of add up that seems to just cost them at just the wrong time or the wrong moment, or ugly things that rear their head at just the wrong moment. And I think with all of these conversations for the entirety of this offseason, this isn't necessarily just specific to the defense, but I think it shades a lot of the defensive conversation. We all need to focus on not trying to be too reactionary, especially from like take the Super Bowl example into perspective, right? Seeing how dominant the Eagles defensive line was, and then immediately juxtaposing that with, if you're a Bills fan, all of the resource allocation financially and draft wise that's been put into the Bills defensive line, and not seeing that kind of return on investment. And then, kind of to this point of Charles, we're going to get into as well, like him even saying defensive line is a hot topic. And then given how well Puna Ford and Tim Settle played on their new respective teams, do you think the scheme has to do with lack of production? Why is it so much better elsewhere? Or why so much better elsewhere? I've been seeing like a lot of these. Is it the scheme? Is it the players? Is it the fit for the players and the scheme? Like where is the disconnect? Because, to Charles's point, I don't think Puna necessarily had a world beater type of year, but he played well for the Chargers. Puna Ford is a big one for me. I didn't understand why he didn't play last year. I wanted Puna Ford to get more snaps instead of them bringing Linval Joseph in, who was very much on his last legs and not very mobile at all. And that Tim Settle was legitimately, statistically, and even on tape to a degree, one of the worst defensive tackles in football last year, especially statistically. And then he came out and had a very strong advanced metric statistical year for the Texans, played on a good team. And so it's fair to see that question and ask. And then again, like to juxtapose the most recent game, which is the Super Bowl, just watching what a team does when they really kind of hit on the horses up front and the investments they make on the defensive line pay off. And then you juxtapose that with the Bills, who, again, financially, draft-wise, multiple avenues of resources that they have allocated year after year to the defensive line, and it never feeling like it's really hit home to the point where they have horses or they have these dudes that can win one-on-one. And I think a lot of it all kind of culminates in this large conversation, and again, I think a lot of it affects the defense more so the offense this offseason. But I think with all of it, and I think this is also a very frustrating piece too, is it feels like they're so far away in certain instances, but then if you sit and you like kind of sit back, it's like they're really not. Like, again, like, and I'll use myself for example, like I just don't, until they beat Kansas City in the playoffs, like I don't see it happen, right? Very much to be the man, you got to beat the man type of deal. And until you knock the king off the throne, the king is the king. And it just feels like, man, like, are they ever going to get over KC? And then you like think about it, it's just like, even when they're depleted, like they give them a really good run, they lose by these field goals or these really short like margins against this team that they usually beat in the regular season, just can't get past them in the playoffs. Like they're still a good football team that just can't get over the mountaintop. So even if they stay the course, they're still a good team. And I mean, hell, if that first down isn't, ruled short on fourth down on the Josh Allen sneak, or if Dalton Kincaid catches that pass, like these little things, are we even having this conversation? Is it a much different conversation for the offense and the defense if the Bills get past Kansas City if they go to the Super Bowl against the Eagles, who I think were a very, very, very tough matchup for anyone because the Eagles are just loaded on their roster. They should have won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They fell apart last year and just retooled and wrecked everyone this year down the stretch once they really started clicking. It would have been a tough challenge for the Bills. But if they go to the Super Bowl, how much of this conversation are we having? Maybe they win the Super Bowl, and then maybe we're not having this conversation at all. It's like, just stay the course. So all of that, I think, kind of coalesces into one. And I just wanted to put that out there for a lot of this conversation this year. Several of the things that I'm going to mention, especially on the defense, are things that I've been kind of clamoring for year after year. And even within myself, someone who's frustrated to not see the specific changes that I wanted or I thought the team needed from a personnel standpoint or a body type standpoint or a roster standpoint or schematically. I think those, and even me thinking those moves have hindered them from finally getting, over the hump and getting to where they want to get. Still a good team, still putting things in perspective in that regard. So I wanted to kind of preface this whole conversation with that. Bills are electric, saying Brandon, meaning Bean, has a tough challenge. They only have Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, a defensive tackle right now. They need free agents plus draft picks. Yeah, we are going to, I got stuff on this one. Baldy Lock 72 says, can I get a one pie in Nottingham in the UK? I love the show, and go Bills. Thank you very much for the kind words. I appreciate that. And oh man, we could take it even further. So step one, get a one pie in the North Towns here in Buffalo. Step two, get it to Rochester and expand the reach in Western New York, maybe push it out a little to Central New York. And then we go global by first getting into Canada. And then we take it to Europe. I love this idea. And you just create this global pizza empire. I like it. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching the show. That's awesome. I appreciate you. Yeah, it is a, I'm just going to keep going with some comments right now. RJ saying, I think the only way to win it all is to build a super team like the Eagles or Ravens. This team needs elite talent. I don't think they have any outside of Josh and maybe Cook. Yeah, I think it depends on how you define elite, right? If you're looking at guys who are like all pro caliber guys, if you're using that as a definition of elite, then Taron Johnson is elite. Matt Milano, when healthy, is elite. But I do think there is a somewhat of a void of like A-tier level players on this Bills squad. I really think that's been the case for a multitude of years. I think they've had a lot of good players, but not necessarily guys. And I mentioned this a couple weeks ago with Kendall on the show when laying out like where the Buffalo Bills go from here after they lost to Kansas City. I do think they need more, everybody always uses the phrase like guys who move the needle. I think they need more than that. They need guys who can kind of swing the pendulum. They need difference makers. They need impact players. They need bucket getters, like whatever verbiage you want to use. However, that's all easier said than done, right? Especially if you're not flush with, cap space or you don't have all these premium draft picks. It's easier said than done. Obviously, this team wants to get those guys. There's just a disconnect, and it's easier said than done. But I think that is a fair point. Nick saying, watching the Chiefs O-line get obliterated the game after the Bills got almost no pressure is really pathetic. Yeah, not great. Paisan saying, I think our offensive line is elite. Dawkins and Spencer Brown, arguably McGovern and Benford on defense. Benford is a real big one. I think he is starting to creep into that strong CB1 tier or upper echelon, potentially with the year that he had. He's really getting into a spot. His tape was strong. His year was strong. The metrics are strong. Even going back into 2020, I forget what the years are, 2023. Yeah, he had a really, really, really strong year. So let's start on the defensive side of the ball, obviously, because we're starting with defense. But let's start with the defensive line. The first thing I want to address, and I don't know how contentious this is going to be because I know he's somewhat of a polarizing player here. Yeah, Bills are electric saying Benford is a high-end corner in the NFL. Yeah, he's having a very strong year. And then all this comment from Charles kind of leads us into it perfectly. Charles says, Bean took a huge swing and missed with Vaughn. Applauded the move, but now paying star money to an aging situational pass rusher. That's perfect because I'm going to start with Von Miller. I think he's kind of the first little domino in all of this conversation with the defense, but especially on the defensive line, which I think the defensive line is the most important piece on this defense. It's arguably the most important piece for any and every defense, but especially the Bills defense, like one that doesn't really blitz. They want to play coverage. They rely on the front four to do so much, from generating pressure and getting home to also playing the run. Like there's a lot of responsibility put on that defensive line. Oh, we got to stop. from, oh, this is ironic, from Miller Defensive Player of the Year 2024. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the super chat. And the question, would you give 3 first-round picks for Myles Garrett? He follows that up by saying, I would. And then he says, our time is now. Man, I wrestle with these ones all the time because I really do like to stockpile draft picks and draft capital, and I'm a huge draft person. I always have been. I love the draft. I love scouting and evaluation, and I love college football just as much so as I do the NFL. And I prefer as many swings at the plate as possible. So more draft picks is always what I want. But oh man, this is so tough for me. And I've literally wrestled with this every day, like the type of allocation it would take to acquire Myles Garrett. On the one hand, I want to say no, but on the other hand, draft picks are always a crapshoot. There's no exact science. There's no guarantee. And Myles Garrett is legitimately one of, not just defensively, but one of the top 10 players in all of football. 3 firsts. Yeah, I would probably do that. I would prefer 2 firsts and something else, like 2 firsts and a third, or even two 1s and a 2, something like that. I think a lot of it, and this is a good comment that you followed up with. He said he hasn't been elite drafting first round anyway. A lot of it comes down to where the Bills always pick. Like, it's hard to get someone elite when you're consistently picking from pick 26 and on. Like, it's hard to get someone elite at pick 30, like they have this year in the first round. But yeah, I'd probably trade 3 firsts for Myles Garrett. That would be pretty sick. I do think Bean is hit on the first round picks, honestly, in a lot of ways. Like, I think Rousseau was a hit. Oliver was a hit. They may not be the hit to the level we want them to be. Kincaid, I think the jury is still out. Good rookie year, hurt last year. Kyer, obviously more of a miss than anything. I think that's the big one, but it's hard to get elite guys at the back end of the first round, which is part of why, okay, if you're trading your first round picks, they're later first round ones. I don't mind that. Yeah, I'd probably trade 3 firsts for Myles Garrett. I would rather it be 2 1s and something else, but I mean, and you can make a case either way. I would at the very least consider it. I like that. I also appreciate the hell out of Joseph right now saying we still have our real Christmas tree up. We still have our real Christmas tree up still too. I appreciate you for that. Thank you very much. You and I are one in this episode. So I want to start that comment from, where was it? That initial comment from Charles regarding Von. I want to start with Von Miller, the conversation around him. And even just in general, Von very much was as advertised when the Bills traded for him and got him. Until he tore his ACL on Thanksgiving against Detroit, he was that closer. He was the bucket getter. He was the pendulum swinger, the one-on-one guy that they needed. And again, he was as advertised. And I think we all knew that even if it worked out in that year, as he went forward with age, miles on the tires, we would see some sort of diminished return with each subsequent year. Obviously, tearing his ACL accelerated that process, hindered the initial, successful returns on investment. But I think that shades it a bit. I do think the initial trade was a win. And it's hard for me to fault Bean with Von getting hurt because he doesn't have a big injury history. He didn't get hurt because he was old and worn down. It was just a field situation and a wrong place at the wrong time type of deal for Von. So I do think that, as K. Morey says in the chat too, that Von was electric in the 2022 KC game. Yeah, he helped close that game out. Like, he was as advertised. Like, that trade was a legitimate win up until he went down, which obviously changed the trajectory. And I don't fault Bean for that because I think his head was in the right place. And I do think the trade would have worked out further had he not gone down with injury, which is a frustrating piece. But alas, regarding Von Miller, and I'm going to be talking about some of this on the Salary Cap Extravaganza show with Greg and Steve Till from the Air Raid tomorrow night live, 9 p.m. Eastern when we do that episode. Right now, for me, for Von Miller, again, regardless of the initial return on investment, so on and so forth, where he was this past year, and this is really what I want to talk about when it comes to Von. So if you look at some metrics, like overall, he finished 8th in terms of pass rush productivity for edges last year. And pass rush productivity is pressures generated relative to how many times you rush the quarterback. So it's an efficiency metric, right? If someone has 200 pressures, you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. But if they rush the quarterback 10,000 times, that's not as good as someone who had 150 pressures, but only rushed the quarterback, 500 times or something like that. You kind of just make an extreme example. But he finished 8th in pass rush productivity. So he had a good year from an advanced metric standpoint. My issue with it is, and maybe this is too nitpicky, if you kind of look at how the pressures came on tape, and then you look at it in terms of the actual data and the sample size. So he played 13 regular season games. One of those games, technically, though, was when he only played 3 snaps against New England in week 18 to kind of get his sack bonus. So let's say he only played 12 games, really, because that 13th game he played 3 snaps. He had 12 games played, 31 pressures generated. 19 of those pressures came across 4 games. The New England game, the Jacksonville game, the Arizona game, and don't yell at me, can't remember, the Arizona game, the first Miami game. So the Arizona game, he had 5 pressures. The Miami game, the first one in week 2, he had 4 pressures. Against Jacksonville in week 3, he had 4 pressures. So the first 3 weeks, he came out hot. And then he also had 6 pressures against the Patriots in week 16. But, and I know it's hard to do this, but if you take those 19 pressures that came across 4 games, the other 8 games, he had 0 pressures, 0 pressures, 2 pressures, 2 pressures, 1 pressure, 3 pressures, 3 pressures, 1. I think he had a very good year. I think some of the metrics kind of overblew how good of a year he had. Even the playoffs, right? The opening game against Denver in the wild card, he had 5 pressures, which looks really good. One of those was a 6-man pressure with Marvin Mims in the backfield who released out, and Von came free off the edge. So it was a schemed up free runner generated as a pressure. Another one was that real clean spin move off the right side. Legit, awesome, beautiful. One was a designed rollout to Bo Nix where Von gets trapped inside by the tight end. Doesn't really affect Bo in any way because the play is already going that way. Bo rolls out to his right. Von gets pinned inside, but it gets generated as a pressure. And then 2 of the others were later in the game where it's a blowout. Von's, teeing off and trying to jump the snap on 4th and 17 and making plays. So the stats are there, but I think if you look within the context of the games and then see actually what happened, I don't think the numbers look as good or sound as good when you go back and you really watch everything. Overall, I think Von had a good year last year. I thought he was a solid high-end edge 3 to a lower to mid-tier edge 2 for pretty much the whole year. And the tape and metrics speak to that. He's pulling off some really clean spin moves. He had a really good long arm last year. First touch, hand usage, push, pull, pulling himself around the corner. He had a good season last year. He also made far more plays against the run that get talked about. Obviously, when it comes to defensive line and Von Miller, the conversation is going to be around pass rush, pressures, sacks, getting home, closing the game out, all that kind of stuff. But he had a good year against the run, and that started from week 1 against Arizona. He helped kind of turn things around when the Cardinals were just running all over the Bills to start the season in week 1. So I think he had a fine year. I think it was a high-end 3 to a lower to mid-tier edge 2 for pretty much the whole year. My issue with that is it's hard for me to stomach this version of Von Miller in 2025, having the second highest cap hit on the team at $23.8 million. Like, that's a lot for a guy that's like an edge 3 or an edge 2 and is not a premier guy. And then part of that also funnels in to how the rest of the edge grouping and defensive line is constructed. So I want to continue to, just focus on the edge grouping first. Overall, if the Bills cut Von Miller right now, well, once the new league year starts, they can save $8.397 million, $17.4 million if they designate him as a post-June 1st cut. Problem with all of that regarding the post-June 1st cut is the Bills would still have to carry his full salary cap charge until June 1st, even though he's been released from his contract or designated for that. So the dead money that you get to split between this year and 2026 wouldn't occur in March, like when they made that or designated that. It wouldn't help them create room for free agents. It would just give them more money to use during like rookie signing and functioning when the cap accounting expands from the 51 players in the offseason to the full roster later. So you'd still get some relief, but it wouldn't, if you designate it again in the new league year, that 8.397 going to 17.44 doesn't really give you more room to sign free agents, if that makes sense. And we're going to get into all this tomorrow on the salary cap extravaganza, but I wanted to put that in there. So my issue with Von is getting paid what he is, the cap hit within that, and then just how this edge grouping is constructed. Greg Rousseau is the best overall edge for the Buffalo Bills, and he's very good. But he's more of a Robin than he is Batman as a pass rusher, which again is fine because he is genuinely elite versus the run. He is one of the best run defending edges and one of the best run defending defensive linemen in all of football. I also know his pressure numbers look very good last year as well, and his productivity and total pressures and all that stuff. He has some similar things when you look at like the pressures. I think he had 63 pressures last year. 30 of them came across like 3 games, with 11 of them coming against Tennessee alone. So not that that's bad. Like, that doesn't mean that he's bad, but I think he's more of an edge 2, solid edge 2 as a pass rusher. Edge 1, legitimate against the run, but I like this from Paisan saying, I think he's more of a Nightwing than a Robin. I like that. Also, I see a lot of comments coming through. I'm getting through this, and then I'll circle back and start to bring more of the pieces in. So you look at what you're paying Vaughn right now and what Vaughn is, and then you look at Groot, who you're probably going to have to pay as well. He's not really an edge 1 as a pass rusher. AJ Epinesa, I think I'm fine with. You could save some money in cutting AJ Epinesa, but I'm fine with him kind of as is. He was tied for 16th out of 127 edges in run stops. He was 24th out of 127 edges in run stop percentage. Again, that's valuable and that carries weight, especially in this defense. But if you're looking for dudes who can get home and affect the quarterback, that's what Vaughn was paid to do. He has obviously deteriorated a bit and isn't that true 1, which again is fine depending on how the rest of the edge room is constructed. But in Groot, you don't have a true edge 1 as a pass rusher. He's more of an edge 2. Epinesa is probably more of an edge 3 as a pass rusher, like mid-tier 3, maybe a high-end 4, low to mid-tier 3. So you look at how this edge group is constructed, you're paying so much for Vaughn. You don't have a true edge 1 as a pass rusher. And if you don't have a true edge 1, it's like, okay, hockey style, you don't have a number 1 line. But if you have 3 legitimate scoring lines and then your 4th line is more like a number 3, you can be okay. Kind of like what the Sabres were in 05-06. They didn't have this true number 1 line, but all 4 of their lines were good. They played defense. They could score. You had this good mix across line 1, line 2, line 3. Their top 3 lines were all like number 2 quality lines. And then their 4th line was more like a number 3. That's that kind of variability you need to have if you don't have a true edge 1 as a pass rusher. The Bills don't have that, but I think the rest of the mix is not there. So it starts with Vaughn. I would like him to take a pay cut again, if possible. I would be very much down for that. If not, I think a cut outright and releasing of him is very, very, very much on the table. Again, I'm going to get into a lot of this tomorrow in the salary cap extravaganza, but I'd rather, if they cut him now, it's going to be a sizable dead cap this year and next year. But say they cut him as free agency starts, you save $8.397 million, pretty much 8.4. I'd rather get like 2 other edges for that. Like, give me, some of my guys who I'm going to talk about in the film room tomorrow, like give me Dante Fowler for about 4.5 or 5 million. And give me John Kaminsky at probably 2.5 or 3. Give me those 2 guys for the money I can save by cutting Von Miller this year. And I don't think the discrepancy is too significant in any way. Or, again, you can keep Von, but then you have to get Von, it would be a really good edge 3 if the Bills, and I'm not just saying this, but if the Bills had Max Crosby or Myles Garrett and then Groot and then Von Miller and then AJ Epinesa. They just need that top tier 1 to round out the group. Problem is, it's hard to get that guy with, where they usually draft, the money, all of these things that we've talked about. So if the edge grouping was constructed a little differently, I would be more than fine just kind of keeping Vaughn as is if they had a true 1, but they do not as of this moment. And because I think it's hard to get that true 1 without sacrificing a lot, like even we talked about earlier, that example and that question, right? Trading for Myles Garrett, is it 3 firsts? Is it 2 firsts and a 2? Is it 2 firsts and a third? How much do you have to give up? And then you have to, the money that he has to come in, the deal to secure him and keep him going forward. Granted, the salary cap could go up in future years. There's all of these type of deals, right? And things to consider with it. But I say all that to say it's harder to get that true edge 1 as a pass rusher than it is to kind of just get more B+ guys and round out the group. But in order to do that, you still have to pay them a little bit. So I am on board for kind of cutting Vaughn and then using that money to try and acquire more B plus level guys and really round out the group and attack it from a sum of its parts type of deal, which the Bills have done in the past. But if you do allocate some of that money, you can get guys that can make a difference. Leonard Floyd, a good example. What, a couple years ago, 1 year, 7 million, 1 year's 8, kind of like a mercenary signing, was very legitimate and the Bills' best pass rusher until he got what I believe was kind of like an undisclosed injury type of deal. Not in a sneaky or shady way, but if you look at that year, once like week 10 or 11 started to hit, when he would make a tackle or a play and he'd get down off the ground, he had to be helped up. You could just tell that he was laboring, he was in pain, he was not the same player down the stretch that they needed him to be. But if you can get multiple guys like that, then all of a sudden you're different. If you have a true edge one as a pass rusher pairing with Groot and Epinesa, and then a legitimate 4 on top of that, whether Javon Solomon's taking the jump or you're bringing in another free agent, I think that's the easier way to go. Aside from just, again, you go out, trade for Myles Garrett, trade for Max Crosby. They just need more hunters. They need more horses. They need more dudes on the defensive line. They need more pendulum swingers. And it doesn't have to mean a holistic pendulum swinger, top 10 player, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. You need guys who are just good at something and can win. Leonard Floyd is a good example. Mercenary pass rusher. Fine against the run as well, but you knew that when he was coming off the edge, he was their number one guy in terms of rushing QBs off the edge. Number one type of pass rusher, pairing him with Ed Oliver, all of a sudden, I'm pairing him with Ed Oliver. Well, they were, but also with Greg Rousseau is what I meant to say. That kind of puts things into perspective a little bit more. So, and they get back to Epinesa. Again, you can save some money in cutting him. I'm fine with him given his run defense piece. And then I'd rather have Rousseau and Epinesa and then build around that with some juice and athleticism and physicality via free agency in the draft. I am not opposed to a full teardown, but bouncing Vaughn and Epinesa just to have Groot and Javon Solomon on the roster at the edge creates a sizable amount of work to be done immediately, which isn't awful. It just pigeonholes you a little bit, kind of forces your hand for this offseason. Now, also tying into some of that question that was asked earlier, and one that I talk about every year, I would like the Bills to change the archetype they go after on the defensive line. When we talk about edge, I want more guys with bend, juice, and or athleticism, not just pure pocket compression guys. And then on the interior, I would like the Bills to give themselves a plugger on the inside, not the tweener types that kind of have a no man's land skill set where they're not dialed up enough in any specific area to change the game, kind of like what Austin Johnson was last year, who I thought he was more one tech backup to Daquan Jones type of material. He came in lighter and more svelte. I don't know if that was at the Bills' direction or not, probably because they like guys to be able to play the run and rush the quarterback by just being one gap penetrators and getting upfield. So maybe they wanted him to shed a little weight and be able to play one tech and three tech. But I think it put him into this no man's land of ineffectivity where he was just like, on a scale of 1 to 10, he was like a 3 or a 4 as a run stopper and a 3 or a 4 as a pass rusher. I think they need someone who, even if they're like, oh, a 6 or a 7 against the run and they're only a 2 against the pass, I'm fine with that at this point. Like, they need a plugger on the inside. If it could be somebody with a little more juice or just somebody who can give you some knockback, generate some, push into the backfield. I'm going to talk about a couple guys tomorrow in the film room in terms of my free agent targets, but I have several in mind that can do that. One that would be a real slam dunk of a hit that costs a little more, and a couple that are a little more cost effective. DJ Jones and Roy Lopez, which we're going to talk about tomorrow night in the film room. But they need to change the archetype on the defensive line. Von Miller was very much an outlier for them, even Leonard Floyd to a degree as well. But they go for bigger, run defending, pocket compression type of dudes. They do not look for bend, dip, juice, athleticism, moves kind of guys, pass rush plan kind of guys. They want dudes who can just line up wide and drive the tackle into the backfield. They prioritize length, size, all that kind of stuff. I would like to change that at edge. And again, on the interior, give me a plugger. And if it can be somebody, it doesn't have to be somebody who's huge, right? If even we're just talking about the draft, right? I know a lot of people like Kenneth Grant. I like Kenneth Grant as well, although he does play a little high, but I'll get into that as we go down the stretch in this offseason. It doesn't have to be someone huge. It doesn't have to be a 330-pound guy or a 340-pound guy. It's funny. I just saw the comment from Charles saying trade for Kenneth Grant. And I am seeing a lot of these comments. I'm going to go back and cycle through to put these pieces in the conversation. It doesn't have to be a huge dude. It doesn't have to be Vita Vea. It doesn't have to be C. Paisan saying Tavondre Sweat. It doesn't have to be some huge mountain of a dude. It just needs to be somebody who can handle themselves against double teams, not get blown off the ball, not get displaced horizontally or vertically. That's it. So it doesn't have to be somebody huge. It could be Kenneth Grant. It could be Derek Harmon. It could be Tyleek Williams, who Paisan just put into the chat. Like it could be, it doesn't, when I say plugger, it doesn't have to be somebody who's huge. Like it doesn't have to be, again, Vita Vea or Tavondre Sweat or just some mountain of a dude. And I also don't want it to be. I don't want it to be somebody who is just run defense and isn't going to impact the game at all as a pass rush. You got to have a little bit of juice. You got to have a little bit of penetration ability in addition to being able to hold your ground and anchor at the point of attack as a run defender, right? But they need more of a plugger type of presence. And it was part of why I'm going to continue to bang this drum. I wanted Elianku to suit up down the stretch. I just thought Carter wasn't really giving you anything. Johnson wasn't giving you anything. Jefferson and Phillips weren't really giving you anything. So why not put a guy in there who's like a 6.5 against the run? And he may only be a 1 against the pass, but it's better than the other guys who are giving you like a 2 against each. And they may be better overall against both when you look at it holistically, but they're still not making an impact either way. And so I'd rather take a guy who can make an impact in a silo than a guy who's still below average at both spots. And so again, archetypes on the defensive line, more bend, juice, athleticism at edge, not just pure pocket compression. Get yourself a plugger on the inside, not these tweener types that have a no man's land skill set where they're not dialed up enough in any specific area to change the game. And also, ideally, they need long-term answers. So if you can sign a couple dudes this year to some legitimate 2 or 3 year deals, or this defensive line class in the draft is really good, especially defensive tackle, but even at edge too, if you can get some long-term answers there, and again, you do have to hit on them, like having Greg Rousseau and then Boogie Basham obviously hurts. Even AJ Epinesa, like I think Epinesa has been better than he gets credit for, but probably not to the level, not even probably, but not to the level of a second-round pick, which is where he was drafted at, right? So get some long-term answers, not free agent cast-offs mid-year like Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson. Like Quentin Jefferson and Jordan Phillips were let go by bad football teams, and the Bills brought them in and they became immediate starters, like not starters, but immediately evolved heavily in the rotation for them on the interior. That is not a good sign. Like they have to start avoiding things like that. That's kind of my thoughts overall on this defensive line. Now, want to grab some of the comments here. There's a bunch on the defensive line. Let me go back here. Let's go. Nick saying, I miss when the Sabres were not the softest team in all of pro sports. Yeah. Those are the days. Charles saying Vaughn alone made more than Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, and Zach Bond combined. Yeah, man. Where are we? RJ going and saying this is where missing completely on Boogie Basham, to a lesser extent AJ Epinesa comes in. Yeah, that's it. Jim Jack, this is a good one here, saying if we can just get a guy that can quote unquote get home and get 10 sacks to go along with Groot's 8 to 10, I would be happy. But our downfall against Kansas City, we need more than one guy that can get pressure. And I think that's the piece. And this is also to tie into it too, right? With the Bills defense, with the way they want to run, they want to rush 4 and they want to play coverage behind it. When I say coverage behind it, I mean like they want 7 guys in coverage, which makes sense, right? If you consistently have 7 guys in coverage, you have the numbers advantage against any route distribution combination. So you have the numbers advantage. You have the bodies advantage. You can disguise things more. You can play any and every coverage. And then depending on what body types you have, you can change how late you spin to it or rotate or all the things you do, right? But those horses up front need to be horses if you're going to run the type of defense that the Bills want to run. If you want to rely on the front 4 to get pressure, you have to have dudes up front. If you want the front 4 to be responsible for gumming up the works against the run, you need to have those horses up front. The Bills just didn't this past season. And now if they don't going into this year, again in 2025, that can still be okay, but you got to tweak the scheme a little bit. I don't think they really want to tweak the scheme. I think they want to continue kind of staying the course. And again, holistically, it's been a good course and a good defense kind of year over year. They just haven't been able to get over the hump. But yeah, that is what they need. Like if you are going to just rush 4 primarily, you need a good 5 or honestly a good 6 dudes across the board on the defensive line. You need a legit starting 4, and then 2 of your backups got to be dudes in some way. Again, Philly, I think, is the extreme example because they hit on so many. But you've got Jordan Davis, you've got Jalen Carter, you've got Sweat, you've got Graham, you've got Nolan Smith, you've got Milton Williams. Even what's his face, who I really liked at Texas, and whose name is escaping me right now. From a couple years ago. I have to look it up. This is going to drive me insane. Moro Ajomo. Thank you. Number 97. Like, even he had a strong year for Philly. Like, they had just everyone they cycled in was having an impact. You need to have like a good 5 or 6, or if you're Philly, like 7 or 8 guys who can affect the game in some way, shape, or form if you're just going to rely on the defensive line to do work. And the Bills have not had that. Paisan saying Josh Sweat, Leonard Floyd, Kenneth Grant, and I'll be good. I think that'd be fine. Sorry, Dave. Dave says RIP the Good Sabres 2005 to 2006. Too soon, Ant. Too soon. I know. This is a good one. From Miller, Defensive Player of the Year 2024. He says Dwayne Carter made some plays early. Dwayne Carter flashed well against the Texans. I do not think he had a good year in any way, shape, or form. I don't think you can make concrete decisions or judgments on any rookie really until year 3. There's so much that goes into adjusting to the NFL from a physical standpoint, but also just from the mental standpoint, right? And I do know he has a good, strong mental makeup to having success in the NFL. My issue with Dwayne Carter is I thought his ceiling coming in and coming out of Duke last year was like, I thought his high end upside was being a rotational player, like a defensive tackle 3 on a team, which can be fine, right? You got him in round 3. If he can be a solid defensive tackle 3 in a rotation, maybe fill in for some guys that are injured above him from time to time, but just being in a solid top 3, that's fine. His main calling card for me was his juice as a pass rusher, which he did not have. You didn't see it on tape. You didn't see it in the metrics. You didn't see it anywhere. And then he was just getting blown off the ball against the run consistently. Like double teams were knocking him back. He's getting displaced horizontally. He's getting knocked backwards. I am very much still wait and see because it's only a rookie year. You never know. He could turn it around in year 2 and build and go from there, right? But if you told me they were ready to cut bait on Dwayne Carter right now and he's not on the team in 2025, I would be fine with that. Like that's how disappointed I was and concerned with his play. I'm not advocating for that, but if they did it, I would not be opposed. But they need something from him. Like right now, I'm looking at the defensive tackle room and I'm seeing Ed Oliver, who's a legitimate starter. I'd like Daquan Jones to be more of defensive tackle 3 and be more of a rotational guy. So if they can sign someone legit in free agency like DJ Jones, or if you want to draft someone at the end of the first round or even in the second who can be a starter alongside Ed, if you can get Ed and a legit starter next to Ed and then Daquan Jones is your defensive tackle 3, this grouping is a strong grouping. Daquan Jones had a better year last year than he got credit for, but I think it was more of a high-end rotational role than a full-time starter role, especially after what he was a couple years ago, which was like genuinely on an all-pro trajectory. But if Carter can be that edge 4, or I'm sorry, defensive tackle 4, I don't really know at this point. I was very disappointed with the season that he had, but kind of we'll see what he is going forward. Paisan saying, I want a young nose tackle that we can plug on our line for the next decade. Yes. Those are electric, following earlier with me saying, agreed. Change the style/body types we have favored the last 5 to 6 years on the D line. I know it's worked to a degree, but it's just, it doesn't play and doesn't track against higher end teams. And we've seen that legitimately with how they want to play schematically. So you either need to tweak the scheme, right? Or get the horses to run the scheme you want to run. Charles saying we need at least 2 legit draft investments into the D line. I kind of don't disagree with that. Jordan K saying Javon Solomon. I liked what he showed in some flashes last year. I just think it's hard to expect a lot out of him this year. Like going into this year and thinking like, okay, Javon Solomon's going to be, a top 4 edge on this Bills team and give you meaningful snaps, especially with how much of an outlier he is in a lot of size categories. It's just a significant question. I would love it if he is an answer, but I'm still very much wait and see on him. He showed some nice flashes, when he got opportunities, especially against the run and some pass rush pop as well. And he had a really good move set and plan in college. Granted, was more siloed in terms of just running the corner and trying to beat guys around the edge. I thought he needed to develop more of an inside move or multiple moves and transitions, which he did a little in the preseason. I'm encouraged by what he showed last year, but I'm in no position to be like, he showed enough that I'm ready for him to be a top 4 edge in the rotation right now. Charles says trade up for Kenneth Grant. I think that's fair. Another comment for Puna Ford. Oh, Paisan, this is a good one. Replace Jordan Phillips with Jordan Phillips, the defensive tackle from Maryland. I like that. I feel like this is going to be a popular joke for a lot of people throughout the offseason. Marty says the Bills draft and develop culture is great for sustained success. It's easy to envy the Eagles and Rams for Super Bowl wins, but they also had multiple years of missing the playoffs. Just need to stop knocking and break down the door. I think that's very fair. Bills have had sustained success. And like I said earlier, they're a good football team. They just haven't been able to get over the hump. So they just need some tweaks and some changes a little bit to finally get over there. They don't need to completely tear down everything because it's not broken. Their process, their ideas, their philosophies, the team, none of that is broken. They just need to get over that hump a little bit. Love this comment from Steve saying, we need a defensive Aaron Cromer. Development on the defensive line has been slow and far less than the O-line. I think this is part of it too, right? Going into the comment earlier in this episode. I think it's a combination of not getting dudes, like having the guys that they prioritize, whether it's body types or just skill set, not necessarily panning out with how they wanted them to, but also the guys that they have brought in haven't necessarily developed to the level that you would want them to. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. And yeah, I feel you on that. Oh, I see. It's funny to go back and see what the chat was doing when I was trying to think of things. And I see everybody answering when I was trying to figure out a Jomo. And so I just see like Milton Williams and then a Jomo and then Zach Bond and then a Jomo. Like I appreciate everybody trying to help me out, but I wasn't looking at the chat at that point. Thank you very much. K. Mori says allegedly 2% pressure rate from Carter through the year. Yeah. And I also think he had like a pass rush productivity of like 2 point something or 3 point something. It was really minimal, like significantly low. Like literally significantly low, really bad. But again, 1 year, we'll kind of see what happens. But I would love for him to be defensive tackle 4, but even that, like I'm skeptical right now, as of this moment. Taylor saying, is Ed too small? No, I don't think so. It depends on what you're looking for. Like if you value bigger guys, then yeah, he probably is too small. But I think he holds himself up against the run better than he gets credit for, and his juice in getting penetration and causing havoc. He had a great game against Kansas City. Like he had a tremendous game against the run and the pass against Kansas City. I don't think Ed is too small. I think Ed is a good defensive tackle. Didn't turn into Aaron Donald like everybody wanted him to, and maybe isn't on the, not even maybe he's not on the level of like Jeffrey Simmons and Chris Jones and these true game wreckers at defensive tackle. But I think Ed Oliver's a very good player on the defensive line. Sorry, I had to mute that. Why I coughed a little bit. Taylor says Jared Verse didn't need development. Very true. But Jared Verse was very much just plug and play. Like good, fine-tuned athlete who plays with speed to power that translates well. And again, if those dudes fall to you, that's awesome, right? Like, I mean, Jared Verse going into the draft process was for a lot of people like a top 10 prospect. Him falling as far as he did was a significant fall. And again, this is easy to say in hindsight, but he should not have fallen. Like I don't know why he did. He should not have fallen. Jared Verse was a stud, who just, whether it was the run on quarterbacks or whatever team needs, yada, yada, him falling should not have happened. Like Jared Verse was one of like the top 10 best dudes in that draft class, and he fell and he played like it. Like that's a legitimate dude. And especially with his style, right? That speed to power, athleticism, juice that he plays with, that's all he relied on in year one. It wasn't a ton of moves. It was just him being like, I'm going to line up in a wide alignment and I'm going to run through your face and your chest. And if you can stop it, cool, but good luck. And that's just what it is. But yeah, a lot of RJ saying Ed being rear naked choked in front of the ref like 5 times during that KC game. I appreciate this wrestling reference. This is very good. I like this a lot. I like that a lot. Let us, and Salvi saying we have no road graders on the interior defensive line. I think that's a good way to look at it. Give me more road graders, more sand. right? On that defensive line. More grit, I think, would be nice, especially on the interior. On the outside, give me more juice and bend and athleticism. Chris says, I know the talk right now is on the line, but what are your thoughts on the secondary? Good question, Chris. And that's a good transition to the secondary. Let me take a drink of water because I've been holding off coughing for about 15 minutes. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. All right. So this is funny from Steve saying Jared first loves Philadelphia fans. Isn't it also crazy, too, that like the Eagles just housed the Chiefs and the Rams were so close to beating the Eagles? Like the Rams had a legitimate chance to win that game. And like you could have made the case that they should have or could have. Like just crazy how that game will probably get forgotten. The Bills almost beating Kansas City will be talked about a bunch. The Rams were so close to beating Philly, in the weather, in the elements, all that crazy stuff. Man, Rams are a fun team. But yes, let's talk secondary. Uh-oh, starting to cough. That's not a good sign. All right, the secondary as a whole, cornerback, safety. My conversation really when it comes to the secondary, it's going to tie into scheme as well. But, you know, overall, I think this defense needs more man coverage, not primarily man coverage, which no one really is going to do in the NFL, but they need more man coverage mixed in, especially on high leverage situations, whether it's, red zone stuff or like third downs, mixing it within and yeah, mixing with different coverages, fronts, all that kind of stuff. But I think they need more of a man coverage presence, more disguised fronts, more disguised pressure looks along with coverage, more disguised coverage, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, more late rotations and creative post-snap spins. So just more of a mental taxing on quarterbacks. What is nice is the Bills defense is very balanced in terms of the coverages they play, whether it's two high stuff or single high stuff. So they can be single high and do cover one, cover three. They can go two high and it can be cover two. It can be cover four. It can be quarters. It can be cover six. They can seamlessly transition from either. You can have cover three, present like cover six in terms of what they're doing and how they're spinning and what they're doing. They are balanced in the coverages they play overall from two high structures and single high structures, but would like them to, again, work in more man coverage and work in more of the creativity pieces in terms of who's dropping, who's spinning, not just on the defensive line, but more non-traditional Tampa stuff or cover two stuff where that middle, Tampa player or pole runner is somebody unexpected and how you're getting to your coverages when and how you're dialing them up. I think the more creative defenses are being rewarded in today's NFL because of their ability to change the pre to post snap picture. Now, you have to be effective when you do it. Doing it just to do it and getting burned isn't going to get you anywhere, but I would like to see some more creativity within that. Also, give me more athleticism and, again, man coverage capability on the back end. The secondary as a whole, my biggest thing for them this offseason and kind of the blanket statement I'm going to keep making about the secondary needs more juice. And if we're just comparing it to 2024, Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp at safety aren't the fleetest of foot at safety. Neither specialize in range or man coverage capability or speed. I would like a safety who has more of a post safety single high presence. This does not necessarily have to mean pure speed or athleticism, right? You don't need a guy who runs a 4.3 or a 4.4. Micah Hyde wasn't a 4.3 or a 4.4 guy, but he was great at reading quarterbacks, reading route distributions, and his angles to the football. It's why he was so effective as a single high post safety. And even Poyer could do some of that stuff too. Like their interchangeability and versatility at safety and removing the free and strong labels from safety. I see that from Ralph saying Bean is allergic to juice. I like that. Poyer and Hyde were at the forefront of removing free and strong from safety, and you just have two safeties. But Hyde was more of the post range type of safety in my eye. Oh, sorry, cough. But secondary needs more juice. We start with safety. Hamlin, Rapp, not the fleetest of foot, neither specialize in range or man coverage capability or speed at that safety spot, right? Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford are both more technical and physical than they are juice and athleticism. Benford, more juice and athleticism than Rasul Douglas, but not really a juiced up or athletic guy. Taron Johnson is a mix of everything and an all-pro, so he's fine. I got no qualms with Taron Johnson. But in an effort to get more schematically diverse in 2025 and be more fluid in their approach versus top-tier teams, I think the Bills defense needs more tools in the toolbox in the secondary, along with the defensive line, like some of the pieces like we talked about. Now, I've said that. I want to say this next piece, and this is a very important piece. They cannot sacrifice schematic familiarity for traits to the degree they did with Kyer Elam. Kyer Elam was a pick based on traits where the thought was he could be coached and molded into the corner that they wanted. But they leaned too far into the traits and too far away from schematic familiarity. And also maybe underestimated how important it was for Elam in college that illegal contact isn't a penalty with how grabby and handsy he was throughout releases, throughout stems, throughout breaks, all that stuff. So I do think the secondary needs a bit of a facelift. The safety combination is going to be interesting, right? If we start from there, actually, no, we'll start from kind of the front back. Rasul Douglas last year, they restructured his contract and had the void years, but didn't extend him. Once they did that last offseason, that was kind of a signaling to me that he wasn't going to be coming back in their race. Now, he might, and maybe he's going to be corner 3 or corner 4, and he comes back at, a very cost-effective type of deal. But I would like to go a different direction at CB2. If he comes back and he is CB2 along with Benford, it's not the worst thing in the world. I just think Douglas has lost a step a little bit. And his signing isn't necessarily the move in terms of that man coverage direction, more juice and athleticism that I would like in the secondary. He's still a good player. He's a good force player against the run. He's a good fitter against the run. He's good. He's physical. He's smart in zone coverage. I do think he had a bit of a down year last year in zone overall. Like the areas where he's been strongest, he was a bit down last year. And then it doesn't necessarily have the skill set or traits that I'm looking for at CB2. But if Rasul Douglas comes back, I'm not holistically opposed to that. Like I still think he's a good corner. I would just rather have him be like a corner 3. So that being said, and again, we're going to talk about some corner free agent targets in the film room tomorrow. But with Ryan Nielsen coming in as a defensive assistant, I expect more press. The Jags were I think we're number 3 in press coverage snaps last year. Monteric Brown was 2nd. Tyson Campbell was 6th. The year before, when he was with the Falcons as their defensive coordinator, A.J. Terrell led the league in press snaps. Jeff Okudah was like 19th. I think the Falcons overall were 2nd in press snaps. I expect to see more press. I expect to see more man. Now, press does not necessarily mean man, and press does also not necessarily mean jamming. You can press and you can mirror. You can soft shoe press a guy where on the snap, instead of getting your hands on him and immediately trying to reroute, you are more mirroring his steps and you're playing more leverage and mirroring or mimicking the wide receiver's movement. So there's multiple ways to play press, but I expect more of that. I expect more of the secondary and the corners in particular closing down and restricting airspace pre-snap and immediately on that post-snap. I do expect some things like you get some press bail or get some off coverage and they'll come up, or you'll get some off coverage and they'll sit kind of right at that spot and play maybe some catch man or some scooch technique, stuff like that. But I do expect more press. I do expect more restricted airspace, just given the changes to the defense this year, even them bringing in the guy from the Pats whose name escapes me right now. What do the Pats do a ton of the past several years? I think this guy was with the Pats for like 10 years. What does the Pats secondary do all the time? Man coverage, like left and right, and also different spins and versatility on the back end. I just expect more man coverage from this defense, and I expect more press. And I am in favor of both of those things being woven into their current defensive ideology and philosophy. And I think that's a good thing. So with that being said, I don't expect Rasul Douglas back, and I expect them to invest in corner either on day 1 or day 2 or sign someone in free agency that can play some semblance of significance either in that skill set or role or who's a legitimate CB2. Now, getting to the safety spot. Safety for me is really tricky this year because I don't dislike Cole Bishop as a player. I still just don't like his fit with this team. I continue to give this example. I thought he was better and at his best in and around the line of scrimmage and the box. That's went from his tape at Utah. Now, this does not mean that he can't also be good getting further away from the line of scrimmage. It doesn't mean that he can't be a post safety. He certainly has the speed and the athleticism and the juice for it. It doesn't mean that he can't function in match coverages and too high stuff or regular zone, all these things, right? I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying I think he was best suited to be in and around the line of scrimmage or to be like a big nickel apex type of player. And I think that's where he was at his best for the Bills. He was at his best, coming down from the safety spot and fitting the run, right? Knowing how to leverage wide receivers trying to crack on him and be able to, stay free, keep an eye on them, absorb the block, and still fit and still make plays coming down from the top. Or just blitzing from the slot or being in and around the box. I think of that Detroit game with how he was just setting the tone initially. I think he is best in and around the box. Again, development, trajectory, coaching. The Bills are great with secondary play, yada, yada, yada. He could get better in that regard, but I'm still questionable on Cole Bishop's fit with the Bills. Then you bring in Taylor Rapp. Now, I do like Taylor Rapp, and I see some of the comments coming in through the chat. Rapp erased so many potential big gains and runs last year coming from the top down. Just being able to fit the run. And again, it's not ideal, right? But there were runs that the Bills gave up that were 8 yards, 10 yards, 11 yards, 12 yards. That could have been 50-yard house calls if not for Taylor Rapp. He's a good communicator, and he is a glue guy on the back end for this defense. And I do think he is important. However, if a good safety falls in the draft, I have no problem with the Bills taking him and then maybe cutting Taylor Rapp post June 1st and save $3 million. Now, hold on. I'm going to mute this because I have to cough again. Oi. So, I do think that is potentially on the table. I don't hate the idea of a Cole Bishop, Taylor Rapp safety tandem. I just, despite how athletic Cole Bishop is, right? I just think, I think you commented this earlier and I missed it. Bills Are Electric says drafting Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. Yeah, there's your post safety right there who specializes in coverage. My trepidation with a Cole Bishop, Taylor Rapp combination is I think they're more similar and redundant, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, than they are different. And that doesn't necessarily they don't necessarily have to be different, but I think neither of them, Rapp is as good from a mental standpoint, reading route distributions, adjusting the coverage, like communicating to the guys in front of him, but he doesn't have the foot speed or the athleticism. If you could put Taylor Rapp's brain into Cole Bishop, that would absolutely be tremendous. Or gives like Cole Bishop's juice and athleticism to Taylor Rapp's body, that would be great. But I think they're more redundant than they are different in the sense that I think both of them are better from a physical standpoint and better in and around the box. Rapp gets things done on the back end as like a deeper safety because of his headiness, his intelligence, his ability to recognize route distributions, formations, alignment, how well he studies, and how smart he is. But he still isn't the most fleet of foot, doesn't have a lot of athleticism. I don't play Madden anymore, but he makes me think of like a safety that has like an 83 or an 84 Madden speed. And like that for me, I don't like that. Like that's not good enough. Now, you could be the fastest, most juiced up athletic dude in the world, but if you don't know how to study tape and you don't know how to diagnose and key and process, all the speed and juice and athleticism in the world isn't really going to help you too much if you're out of position and you don't know where you need to be. So I kind of put these two into an interesting box where, especially for me, where I would like more range in at least one of the safeties. Like I think Cole Bishop has range from an athleticism and like foot speed standpoint. I don't think he has it right now in terms of a processing standpoint and an angles to the football standpoint. Now he could get there in year 2 or year 3, but right now that's just where like my trepidation is. And then from a Taylor Rapp standpoint, I think he has the angles down and the recognition and the processing and the diagnosing, but I don't think he has the foot speed or the juice to get there. So that's my only issue with safety. And then you put that in with kind of what I mentioned earlier. I do think Cole Bishop is a guy who can man up against tight ends, who could potentially man up against some bigger slot type of receivers, cover some running backs, that type of deal. But then again, if Bishop is in and around the box and he's manning up on guys, say you're playing cover 1, right, which is single high coverage, one safety in the post, and then man coverage underneath, right? That means if Bishop is that up safety and he's man covering against a tight end or running back or slot or whatever, that means Taylor Rapp is the single high post safety on the back end. And I don't love that because I don't think Taylor Rapp is best suited to be a single high post safety. Now, if because of his range and lack of athleticism and speed. Now, if you flip him, right, Bishop has more of the foot speed and the athleticism to be the single high post safety, just doesn't necessarily have the angles down, the recognition, the diagnosing, and the processing. And then Rapp being that up safety, again, doesn't really have the athleticism or the man coverage chops to man up against a lot of tight ends or different running backs or different slot body types and that type of deal. So I think that's a really interesting piece. And then on top of that, oh, Bills are electric. You are in my head. Sorry, cough. Hold on. Now, if DeMar Hamlin does not return, as Bills are electric says, the Bills need a safety number 3 as well. That's also a very good point. I think DeMar Hamlin's a good safety 3. I don't think he's a starter in this league, or if he is a starter, he needs to be a starter alongside like a legitimate safety. Like you have to pair him with like Jesse Bates, someone who is a good overall safety and who also has range and anticipation and diagnosing and processing all in one. Like you need to pair him with a legitimate safety. Like you got to pair him with like Antoine Winfield or, somebody like that who's a top tier type of safety. I don't think DeMar is bad. I just don't think he's fit to be a regular starter unless he's being paired with someone who's just one of the best at that position. But to this comment and to my notes that's next up here, if DeMar Hamlin does not return, yes, the Bills do need a safety 3. So that could come in the draft. That could come in free agency. Who knows? Maybe the Bills are going to blow everyone away and they're going to sign Javon Holland, which I don't think makes a ton of sense, but I love Javon Holland, so I would not be opposed to this idea. But I do think the safety room needs addressing potentially. Again, I'm fine with Bishop and Rapp. I'm not opposed to them bringing back Hamlin, and then it's again a camp competition and we see what happens, but I really just don't. I don't love the idea of like Rapp and Hamlin starting together again. I don't love the idea of Bishop and Hamlin starting together. I don't mind Bishop and Rapp. I like both players individually. I just don't like when I'm talking in both players. I mean Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp. I like both players individually. I don't necessarily like their fit in the Bills defense and their fit together as a safety tandem, if that makes sense. So it's a weird spot for me when it comes to this safety grouping. Taylor saying Hamlin is better than Rapp with a question mark? No, not for me. I think Taylor Rapp is a better safety than DeMar Hamlin at this point. And just with how limited Hamlin's upside is, I think it'll kind of always stay that way. Going to take a drink. Oh, sorry. Biting off the cough. RJ says, I think they need to sign a safety and then draft one as well. Both need to be more the center fielder type. Yeah, I would like that. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I do have to watch some tape. I know Nick Emenwari from South Carolina does some fun stuff. I think he's more box safety and in and around the line of scrimmage than he is post safety, deep safety type of player. But we'll see kind of, I have to fully get into the tape. I'm not getting ahead of myself with that or with the next person I'm about to say, but man, if Malachi Starks from Georgia is there, and I know he had a down year this past year, if Malachi Starks from Georgia, that safety is there at pick 30, it's going to be really, really, really hard for me to say no. And this is actually super funny. Spin saying if the top safety in the draft falls to our first round pick, do we draft them over another position? For me, I'm just not where I am in the draft class right now in my I'm still doing free agency stuff. I've done a little bit of draft stuff, but I'm not in a position right now to speak. And I've seen some stuff. Again, I've watched a ton of college football during the season, but one broadcast is a lie. I need to see it from the all 22 and be able to do my evaluations. And I've seen some thoughts from some other people and had discussions with people as well, but I'm not going to use someone else's evaluation as my own. So it would really depend on what else is there. Like if the top safety falls, so say Malachi Starks is there, but there's also a really good edge or a really good defensive tackle. Oh, like that's tough for me. Also, free agency is going to depend a lot too, right? If the Bills go and sign Dante Fowler and DJ Jones, then all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? We can wait till round 2. We can do, both round 2 picks and the round 4 pick on the defensive line, maybe depending on what we want to do. But I'm cool with just best player available in round 1. So it depends on what they do in free agency and then who else is there at pick 30. But like I mentioned, man, if Malachi Starks is there, just based off of what I saw from his tape from 2023 in studying other Georgia players and then seeing the plays that he's made on broadcast this year, like it's going to be hard for me to not just fall in love with Malachi Starks and want him to fall to pick 30. And then if that happens, maybe you're sitting there with, that's your top 3 safety group and you see who beats out who and where you go from there. I think that does throw a bit of a wrench in because then who's starting? What's your timeline? Do you sit Starks for this year and is Taylor Rapp and is it Rapp and Bishop and then Starks takes over the next year? But I do think Starks fits well just because with match coverage capability, man coverage capability, what he can do in the slot as well. He had to fill in there a bit this year for Georgia because they had some injuries. So he played that star or that apex role that, kind of Brian Branch played at Alabama. But Starks is more of a true safety than Branch was or is. So yeah, it's going to be tough. Taylor says, so we need 2 starting safeties. That's a lot of development. I don't think they necessarily need 2. I think Bishop and Rapp are both starting caliber safeties, or I think Rapp is. I think Bishop can be. I just don't, again, I don't love them as a fit together. And then also kind of in this defense as a tandem. That's the only thing that kind of throws me for a loop. I like them both individually as players. I just think they could be better in different situations or with a different dancing partner at safety, if that makes sense. Linebacker, I don't really have too many questions other than is how healthy is Matt Milano? I am not at the point where I think Dorian Williams needs to start over Matt Milano and they should jettison Matt Milano out. Milano got much better as the season went on, and hopefully with a regular offseason and training camp, I think he can get back to that impact level that he was pre-injury, and him and Bernard could be really, really, really fun together. And I like the idea of Dorian as a 3 in their base looks or just kind of waiting in the wings and we see what happens from there. I don't have too much at that linebacker spot. I think the top 3 are solid, and I'm happy with that. I do think Dorian still needs more time on task from a coverage standpoint, but I think, he showed some good development in 2024 and made progress that I wasn't sure he was going to make. So kudos to him for that. I like the top 3 of Bernard, Milano, and Dorian Williams kind of sitting behind there and going from there. So I don't have too much at that linebacker spot. And overall, again, I think a lot of the questions, obviously on the defensive side of the ball, if linebacker is good, then it comes to the defensive line and it comes to the secondary. And a lot of it, again, is everything for me, and I really think for this team, stems from their commitment to the current philosophy and ideology when it comes to personnel. Do they still want to just look for pocket compression guys at edge? Do they still want tweener types at defensive tackle? Do they still prioritize zone and recognition and responsibility over athleticism and man coverage ability? Do they tweak them a little bit? Not necessarily to the Kyer Elam level that they did a couple years ago because that obviously didn't work out, but do they tweak them a little bit at corner? What are they doing at safety? And then within all of it, how much of the schematic changes do we see with the additions that they've had in the secondary from a coaching standpoint and from Ryan Nielsen being a defensive assistant and what Sean McDermott talked about coming out of the Kansas City game and just how much more man do we see? How much press? Do we have schematic changes? If you do have schematic changes, you do need to change the body types, especially in the secondary along with it. Who do they lean into? Where do they allocate sources and funds? I think there's obviously several questions which we outline within this episode, but all of them I think really start with how committed are they to the current ideology and philosophy that they have from a player identification and acquisition standpoint. And that's really what it's been for the past couple of years for me. I've thought for several years, you need more man coverage capability at CB2. You need more man and press overall in the secondary to be able to work that in. But again, you need the horses to be able to do it. And then up front, if you're going to run that system, you need more horses to constantly get penetration, to win up front, to win one-on-ones, to get you buckets when you need buckets, to be pendulum swingers, to move the needle more than just moving the needle. It needs to be in a significant fashion. And so it really all stems from there. And it should be a fun offseason, right? Again, this team was a Final Four team. They have some good draft capital. They do have some financial flexibility, which they can increase with some extensions and some cuts, which I think will happen and which we will outline into great detail tomorrow in the salary cap extravaganza live at 9:00. Again, myself, Greg Thompson, the Air Raid Hour folks. It will be an interesting offseason on this side of the ball. Offense, I'm going to be diving into on the back end of this week. Again, if you are just tuning in, I'm going to do this same kind of episode, I think Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, live here on the channel. We'll do the same type of deal for the offense. But I think the offense has more fun, adjustment, and tweaking questions than the defense. I don't think the defense needs to be completely overhauled, but I think they need more than tweaking. I think they need somewhat of a facelift or of a reshaping. I don't know what word evokes the right severity, but you kind of need to get to that spot. And we'll see. Question here from Ralph Wilson Sr. saying, with Vrabel and Glenn in the division now, do you expect power running games coming? If so, should the Bills get bigger and cheaper at the mic? Hold on. Oh, I'm falling apart. Yeah, I do. I mean, I expect more running in general. I think that's kind of where the league is going. I expect more run games. I expect more gap scheme runs. Also, I expect more quick game eventually to come, not just from those teams, but from the NFL in general. I expect more like kind of 3-step drop, quick game, true kind of pre-snap structure, safety reading, leverage reading, box counts type of deal, spacing, leverage. I expect that game to start to come back a little more as well. That's a big thing. That's kind of my offseason project that I'm going to be working on, similar to what I did last offseason with condensed formations and noticing things that throughout the tape, throughout the entirety of the year and scouting different teams and evaluating and watching things schematically, that led me to the condensed formation and reduced formational width aspect last year and body types that I spent a lot of the offseason talking about on my own, doing tape study and episodes, spoke about it with Mina Kimes, and did a lot of things with that. But this year's project is kind of more quick game that I think is going to start to come back in fashion for a lot of teams. Or league wide, maybe a little bit this year and pick up going forward. And then within that, I do, I expect more teams to start running the football. I expect more 21 heavier 12 personnel, 6 offensive lineman groupings. I expect more power running to kind of be coming down the pipe, not just within the division, but league wide. And then, especially knowing Vrabel and Glenn, which again is part of why you need dudes up front who can hold up against the run. Like you need guys who can't get displaced. You need dudes who are going to keep Milano and Bernard clean and Taron Johnson clean. You need guys who won't get displaced. You need dudes who can plug and play a gap and a half or maybe even 2 gap at sometimes, light boxes, heavy, whatever it is. That's part of it too. But that's a good foreshadowing for a lot of the work that I'm doing this offseason. Good question, Ralph. Well done. Well done. Yeah, this will be a fun one. Again, I think a lot of these conversations, it starts with, if I had to pick any one grouping that I think needs the most attention, I do think it is the defensive line. Really, at the secondary right now, I still want some things to change, but I'd be fine with Benford, Rapp, Bishop, and then a new CB2. With getting the skill set pieces that I talked about of where I want to see this defense go. But even if they brought back Rasul Douglas, I wouldn't love it, but I wouldn't be necessarily opposed to it. I think the defensive line does need changes. I think they need a true pass rushing edge one. Could be a situational guy. Doesn't have to be, again, you can have AJ Epinesa and Greg Rousseau be your main dudes who see the most snaps, who play a lot of first and second down stuff. And then you're taking Epinesa off the field on third down and you're bringing in, a mercenary off the edge. Or if you find somebody in free agency or the draft and they can be your, starter alongside with Groot and AJ Epinesa's 3, whatever the hell, I don't care. They just need a true pass rushing edge one. I think they need to change the archetypes and the body types that they look for at that edge position. I think they need to change what they do on the interior. They need a plugger. They need more of a run fit focus, especially if you're going to play with 4 down. Again, not sacrificing the pass rush capabilities, but they need to change those dials a little bit there. Jordan says Khalil Mack. I would love that. I just think he's going to be too expensive. I still think he's got juice, compresses the pocket consistently and wins in that regard, and also plays really good run defense. I would not be opposed to Khalil Mack in any way, shape, or form. Maybe he doesn't take a huge contract because Buffalo is a Super Bowl contender and he wants to do that. Maybe. I don't know. But I would not be opposed to Khalil Mack. I just think he's going to cost too much. I think he's going to be like $15 million plus in terms of average annual value. And that immediately is just like, that's too much. If he wants to come here and play for like $10 million a year, that'd be sick. If he wants to come here for a 1-year, $10 million deal or a 2-year, 20, something like that. But I think he's going to get like 15 plus easy. He might even get more than that. And that immediately I just don't think the Bills can do that financially for one guy with all the other pieces they need to address. But I would not be opposed to that in any way, shape, or form. Also, something I'm not opposed to, the best pizza in Buffalo. We talked about them earlier. One Pie Pizza. Online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. They also do catering options, a bunch of really good different mac and cheeses, really good salads. They got dessert stuff as well. Really good people making really good food. Treat yourself to some One Pie Pizza this week, tonight, this weekend, tomorrow. Maybe not tonight because they're closed already, but tomorrow, the weekend, whatever have you, they are the best. And again, like I always talk about, they do a lot in terms of giving back to the community, whether it's partnering with Roswell, whether it's Toys for Tots, whether it's partnering with the Alzheimer's Foundation or the SPCA. They just give back in a multitude of forms and fashions. And I think that's a really awesome thing. Paisan says they put an even number of pepperoni on each pizza. They're the best. They're pros. Also, and I mention this all the time too, the thing I really like if you get veggies on them, because I've gotten multiple pizzas for like family, and we'll do like different kinds, and some of my family like, oh, like do these veggies, and so I will. They chop them up like individually and then sprinkle it all evenly across the pie. Like it's just so good. Everything they do is top notch. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Treat yourself and the family to some One Pie. Mention Disguised Coverage and Cover One when you get there. Also, they named a pizza after us, the Cover One Allen Goat. It has some goat cheese and a bunch of go to the menu. I can't even. I don't want to do a disservice to it, but it's fantastic. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza, friends, folks, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to put up the banner that says Toodles, folks, because I'm about to start coughing uncontrollably. We went longer than I thought. I thought I was only going to be able to last 45 to 50 minutes before I started coughing again. We got through an hour and 21. I thought it was great. Before any of you folks leave, if you're watching live, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. K. Maury says, Ant says he won't do an hour and a half show, does an hour and 25-minute show instead. That's me. Hey, in all fairness, it's the chat's fault. You guys were solid tonight, as always. I appreciate you folks. Appreciate you, Bills Are Electric. Thank you very much. Great comments all night from you and on Twitter as well. But yeah, I never know how these off-season episodes are going to go in terms of engagement or attendance. And so really it was the chat. Like if I was just sitting here reading my notes and having the discussion, I would have been done in probably like 35 to 45 minutes. But the chat was good. I appreciate you folks tuning in. Again, drop a like on this video if you're watching live now on later. If you're watching later, non-live, that's cool too. Please still drop a like on this video. Turn on notifications for the Disguised Coverage playlist here on YouTube. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate, review, subscribe if possible. That is a hugely important help to myself and the entire team. All the notifications, the playlist turn-ons, likes, ratings, reviews, subscriptions, all that stuff. It means a lot. So if you are able to, please do so, please, and thank you. And yeah, thank you very much to everyone who tuned in live. The chat was great. The engagement with each other, the stuff for me, that's the reason why we kept going on. We probably would have. Thank you, Ralph. Ralph says humidifier could do some good for you, Aunt. Be well. I appreciate you. Yeah, my wife said the same thing earlier today. I have forgotten every night. Yeah, I'm hoping that'll clear me out. I would like to not keep coughing, and I'm about to. Oh, appreciate you, Carl. Thank you very much. Everybody's giving me suggestions. Carl says, "Hope you feel better, Aunt. Go take some NyQuil." I was thinking Theraflu, but that's fair. But yeah, I appreciate you folks and the well wishes and all that stuff. Again, thank you very much for stopping by. The engagement with myself and each other. If there was something I did not get to or I missed, get at me on Twitter at pro__ant. Get at me on Blue Sky at proant. No separation there, just PROANT, or put a comment on YouTube. I'll circle back and get to it. Anything and everything. I appreciate you folks so much for stopping in, for watching live here on YouTube, watching later on YouTube, listening on the audio platforms, anything and everything. It means a lot. So thank you folks very much. Thank you very much to Miller Defensive Player of the Year 2024 for the super chat earlier in the episode. That was greatly appreciated as well. And yeah, okay, Maury says, feel better and have some sweet cough drops. You know what my combo is? I make a Theraflu and then I drop some honey. I drop one honey Halls into the Theraflu and then I drink that and then do the Halls after. I think that might do that and go pass out in about 15 minutes. But I appreciate you folks. Thank you very much. Hopefully I sound better for the film room and the salary cap extravaganza tomorrow. I won't have to do all the talking, so either way, that should help as well. Appreciate you folks. Thank you very much. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you tomorrow for another episode of the Film Room. And then I'll see you Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern, back here again to have this same type of discussion, but on the Bills offense instead. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.